How would you react if someone close kept a huge secret from your family? I spent months preparing the perfect baby shower for my sister, only to discover she had been hiding her pregnancy from everyone, and that night, I realized I wasn't the only one who felt betrayed. I had spent months planning the perfect baby shower for my sister. Every detail was meticulously considered, every decoration chosen with care, every guest list curated to perfection. It wasn't just about throwing a party. It was about creating a moment, a memory that would celebrate her, the life she was bringing into the world, and the bond we shared as sisters. I had envisioned soft pastels, delicate floral arrangements, a spread of her favorite foods, and a cake so beautiful it could have been displayed in a magazine. Each evening, I found myself sketching ideas, crafting invitations, arranging logistics with a precision bordering on obsession. I was consumed by anticipation and excitement. The house became my workshop. Streamers hung from ceilings in my imagination. Before they ever touched the walls, cupcakes were tested and perfected in my mind before any ingredients were purchased. I imagined the smiles of our family, the laughter of friends, the soft gasps when they saw the elaborate decorations, and the thoughtful touches I had planned. I wanted everything to be flawless. And in my vision, my sister's joy would be palpable, her gratitude clear, and our bond strengthened in ways only these significant life events could foster. But life, as it often does, has a way of subverting even the most meticulous plans. Days before the shower, I arrived at the local bakery to confirm my order and ran into a mutual friend. One of those people who always knows everyone's business. She looked at me with wide eyes, a peculiar combination of sympathy and disbelief, and said, almost cautiously, "You know, everyone's already been talking about it. Sarah isn't actually pregnant anymore." My stomach lurched. I blinked, thinking I must have misheard, because it was impossible. I had spent months planning, baking, shopping, coordinating. I had even created personalized party favors, anticipating guests who would ask when the due date was. "Not pregnant anymore," I repeated, my voice tight. She was pregnant." "Yes," the friend said gently, lowering her voice as if she were protecting me from the truth. "But she hasn't told anyone. Some people know, but she's been hiding it. No one's supposed to know." My world spun. I staggered back outside, the sunlight blinding, and pressed my hands against the cool metal of my car. Every plan, every hour, every tiny detail felt suddenly absurd. Months of preparation, of excitement, of dreaming about an event that was supposed to honor a monumental life change, had been built on a secret I hadn't known existed. My heart twisted, a strange mixture of hurt, disbelief, and an unfamiliar sting of betrayal. My sister had deliberately hidden the pregnancy, kept it from me, from our family, and here I was, months of emotional labor and anticipation dangling in a void of ignorance. That night, I tried to process it. I sat at the kitchen table, scattered invitations around me, little gift bags half filled with ribbons and tissue paper. I stared at the cake design I had sketched, the menu I had meticulously compiled, and the list of guests I had painstakingly organized. It felt like staring at the ruins of something that had never existed. I felt a deep ache, not just for the wasted time or the unutilized effort, but for the emotional investment, the connection I had expected to share with my sister in this moment of celebration. I wanted to be angry. I wanted to confront her immediately. But there was something else beneath the surface, something more complicated than frustration or resentment. There was confusion, a profound sense of dislocation. How could someone I had trusted so deeply, someone I had loved and supported unconditionally, hide something so significant from me? Was it fear, shame, or a simple desire to control the narrative of her own life? The questions spun endlessly, each one cutting sharper than the last. That evening, as I wandered through the living room, I noticed the faint scent of baby powder I had bought in anticipation, the soft pastel decorations still stacked neatly in the corner, and the unfinished invitations on my desk. It was surreal. A celebration designed to honor life that I had believed existed, but which, at least in the eyes of everyone but my sister, had been hidden. And yet, there was another, more disturbing realization creeping into my mind. I was not the only one who felt betrayed. By the time the sun set, and the shadows stretched across the floor, I began to notice subtle signs in the messages I had received from other friends and relatives. Some hinted at knowing something I did not, others expressed confusion about dates, announcements, and arrangements. It became increasingly clear that my sister's secret had not only affected me but rippled outward, touching friends and family who had expected to share in this joy. The realization was heavy. My sense of betrayal was mirrored in others, though perhaps they hadn't voiced it. I spent hours sitting quietly, replaying every interaction I had had with her over the past months. Every dinner, every casual conversation, every hint of excitement I thought I had shared. Could it all have been meaningless? The cognitive dissonance was staggering. I had been preparing for a monumental life event, assuming shared joy, only to discover a hidden reality that reframed every assumption, every gesture of love and connection. And as I sat there in the dim light, surrounded by decorations and notes meant for a celebration that could not happen as planned, I realized something else. This was not just about a hidden pregnancy. It was about trust, about transparency, and about the delicate, fragile web of expectations and emotions that binds family together. I wasn't angry, not yet. I wasn't ready to confront. But I knew one thing with absolute clarity: I would not allow this betrayal, this omission, to go unexamined. I needed to understand why, and I needed to bear witness to it. And as the first night fell, I resolved to stay vigilant, to watch, to listen, and to wait. Because the truth, when it revealed itself, would demand acknowledgement, and perhaps, in that acknowledgement, we could begin to reconcile the feelings of hurt, confusion, and betrayal that now hung heavily over our family. The following morning, I woke with a sense of unease. The house was quiet except for the distant hum of the refrigerator and the faint rustle of leaves outside the window. I moved cautiously through the living room, past stacks of pastel decorations, unopened invitations, and meticulously arranged gift bags. Everything I had prepared for the baby shower seemed both tangible and surreal, a monument to a celebration that was never meant to be. The reality of my sister's hidden pregnancy pressed down on me like a weight, and I felt a strange mixture of frustration, confusion, and sorrow. I picked up the invitations, running my fingers over the smooth cardstock, each one a testament to my effort and anticipation. Months of careful planning had gone into crafting the perfect gathering, but now they felt almost absurd, like props for a play that had never been staged. I realized that while I had been preparing to celebrate life, I had been preparing in ignorance. And yet, amidst the sense of betrayal, a subtle thought took root. The truth of her secrecy would soon reveal itself, and it would not only impact me. Others in our circle, friends, family, and extended relatives, had been similarly kept in the dark. The ripple effect of her concealment would extend far beyond my own disappointment. By late morning, I began to notice small signs of this ripple. Messages appeared in my inbox from mutual friends, awkward and hesitant. "Did you know?" One wrote, "I'm not sure what's happening, but I think something's been hidden from everyone." Others were more pointed, subtly conveying the confusion and mild indignation they felt upon discovering the secret. It became clear that my sister's decision to hide the pregnancy had created a shared sense of betrayal. I was not alone in my feelings, and the realization was oddly comforting and disquieting at the same time. Comforting because I was not imagining my sense of hurt, disquieting because the betrayal was broader than I had initially understood. The afternoon passed in a haze of contemplation. I wandered through the house, occasionally checking on the decorations I had so lovingly arranged, imagining how they would have looked once guests arrived. I thought about the conversations I had planned, the games, the heartfelt speeches, the laughter that would have filled every corner. In every imagined scenario, my sister was the center of attention, yet her role had been orchestrated in secrecy, hidden from those who might have shared in the joy. The contrast between expectation and reality was stark, and it left a hollow ache in my chest. I decided to reach out to a few close family members, people I trusted to understand the complexity of the situation without judgment. I called my aunt first, hesitating as I tried to find the words. I think Sarah has been hiding something from everyone," I said carefully. Her voice was immediate, filled with a mixture of surprise and concern. "Hiding what?" she asked. When I explained what I had learned, she was quiet for a long moment. That explains a lot," she finally said, her tone tinged with a combination of shock and disappointment. I had noticed some odd behaviors, some strange inconsistencies, but I didn't want to pry. I suppose it was worse than I thought. The call ended with an unspoken understanding. I realized that the secret my sister had kept was not just a personal slight against me. It had been a deliberate concealment from everyone, a distortion of reality that affected multiple people. My sense of betrayal deepened, but it was no longer solely about the baby shower. It was about transparency, about trust, and about the emotional landscape that had been quietly reshaped by her omission. Later, as the evening approached, I met with a few of our mutual friends. They had already begun to piece together fragments of the truth, cryptic comments, unexplained absences, subtle hints that had now taken on greater significance. As we talked, the sense of shared indignation grew. Everyone expressed frustration, confusion, and hurt, and in that moment, I realized that the impact of my sister's secrecy extended far beyond what I could have anticipated. I was not alone. We were all participants in a collective sense of disappointment and betrayal. That night, alone in my room, I reflected on the sequence of events. The decorations I had prepared, the invitations, the careful planning, all of it had been overshadowed by the revelation that my sister had been hiding her pregnancy. I felt the sting of unacknowledged labor, of emotional investment that had been disregarded, but I also recognized a new layer of complexity. The betrayal was shared, not just personal. Others, like me, had felt the impact of her secrecy, and that realization changed the way I viewed the entire situation. I understood that the coming days would be delicate. Conversations would need to happen, emotions would need to be navigated carefully, and the bonds between family members would be tested. I could not simply confront my sister with anger. The situation required subtlety, empathy, and strategic consideration. The truth had revealed itself to me, but it would need to unfold gently among the others who had also been affected. And so, as the night deepened and the house grew quiet, I resolved to approach the situation with patience, determination, and an awareness that this revelation would not only reshape my relationship with my sister, but also the broader network of friends and family who had been drawn into the web of secrecy. By the time I fell asleep, I had formed a plan. The following days would require careful observation, thoughtful communication, and perhaps, most importantly, restraint. I needed to understand the motivations behind my sister's secrecy, the reasons she had chosen to hide her pregnancy, and the emotional consequences of her decision. And I also knew, with a certainty that settled deep within me, that the moment of reckoning, when the truth would be acknowledged and the feelings of betrayal confronted, was approaching. The question was no longer if it would happen, but how and whether the resulting confrontation would lead to understanding, reconciliation, or further fracture. The next morning, the house felt unusually quiet, almost anticipatory, as if it sensed the tension that had begun to settle over our family. I wandered through the rooms, passing by the pastel decorations and neatly stacked invitations that now seemed almost ironic in their purpose. My mind raced as I considered how to navigate the situation delicately. I knew I couldn't approach my sister with anger. Her secrecy wasn't just about betrayal. It was about control, vulnerability, and perhaps fear. The challenge lay in unraveling her motivations while also protecting my own feelings from being swept aside yet again. I decided to reach out to one of my closest friends who had known about my meticulous planning for the baby shower. We met at a small cafe nearby, and as soon as I began recounting the latest revelation, her expression mirrored my own combination of shock and disbelief. "So she's been hiding this from everyone?" she asked, lowering her voice. I nodded, swirling the coffee in my cup as the bitterness matched the knot in my stomach. "Yes," I said, "and the part that hurts the most isn't even the secrecy itself. It's that I invested months of planning, emotional energy, and love into something that might never even happen. Or worse, might never be appreciated." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You're not alone in this," she said. "Others feel betrayed too. There's a ripple effect, you know. People notice. They feel the omission even if they don't say it." Her words resonated in me. The realization that this secret was affecting more than just me, that it had quietly altered everyone's understanding of the family dynamic, added a complex layer to my feelings. This wasn't simply personal, it was collective, a subtle yet profound disruption of trust and shared joy. When I returned home, I found a few family members gathered in the living room, speaking in hushed tones. It became increasingly clear that the secret had been discovered in fragments by others. Their conversations, full of speculation and concern, revealed a mixture of emotions: shock, disappointment, and in some cases, mild resentment. I listened silently, trying to gauge the scope of the impact. The house, once filled with anticipation and excitement for the baby shower, now carried an undercurrent of tension that no amount of pastel decorations could mask. Later that afternoon, I spoke with my mother. Her eyes were full of concern, and the lines around her mouth were tighter than usual. "I noticed some odd behaviors," she said quietly, almost to herself, "but I didn't want to overstep or pry. Now I see why you were so upset. You invested so much of yourself, and this secrecy, it hurts everyone." I nodded, feeling the weight of her understanding settle over me. It was comforting to know that someone else recognized the emotional labor I had expended, the care and attention I had poured into preparing a celebration that was now overshadowed by a hidden truth. By evening, the household was tense, but the tension was no longer directed solely at my sister. There was a subtle shift, an unspoken acknowledgement that her actions had repercussions beyond the personal. Conversations were cautious, gestures measured, and eyes frequently darted toward her in silent questioning. I watched all of this from the quiet of the hallway, recorder in hand, not to spy, but to preserve the subtle dynamics of emotion that were unfolding naturally. The nuances of betrayal, confusion, and emerging empathy were delicate, fleeting, and significant. When my sister returned home later that evening, she carried herself with her usual confidence, unaware that the secret she had held so tightly was beginning to unravel. I greeted her politely, careful not to betray my awareness of her concealment. Her smile was bright, but it didn't reach her eyes. An imperceptible shadow of anxiety betrayed her otherwise composed demeanor. She chatted lightly, asking about the invitations and decorations, but I noticed the hesitation in her responses, the subtle deflection in her tone. She knew at some level that the atmosphere had shifted. The night grew long, and I found myself sitting quietly in my room, reviewing the details I had gathered. It became evident that the revelation of her hidden pregnancy had set off a chain reaction. Friends who had been kept in the dark, family members who sensed inconsistencies, and my own emotional journey of anticipation, disappointment, and now, cautious observation. I realized that this was not merely a story about a baby shower, it was a study in trust, transparency, and the fragile nature of familial bonds. Finally, as the house settled into near silence, I reflected on my plan moving forward. Confrontation would have to be deliberate, thoughtful, and controlled. I could not allow my emotions to dictate the unfolding of events. Instead, I would need to gather the perspectives of others, consider the nuances of her motivations, and prepare for the moment when honesty could be addressed without escalating into unnecessary conflict. The balance of trust and reconciliation hung in the air like a fragile thread, waiting to be woven into something stronger if approached with care. As I drifted into an uneasy sleep, I understood that the coming days would be pivotal. The truth would need to be acknowledged by multiple parties, and the emotional landscape of our family would inevitably shift. Yet within that tension lay the possibility for clarity, understanding, and a re-evaluation of bonds that had been quietly strained. I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my chest, that the resolution of this hidden pregnancy's revelation would redefine relationships, test loyalties, and ultimately determine whether forgiveness and understanding could emerge from the shadows of betrayal. The following morning, I woke with a mixture of apprehension and resolve. The house felt heavy with anticipation, and I knew that the fragile threads of trust and understanding could no longer be left unattended. I gathered myself, rehearsing the words I might say, preparing for a conversation that would require both honesty and restraint. I knew that approaching my sister with anger would accomplish nothing. The goal was to uncover the reasons behind her secrecy, to allow the truth to emerge without creating irreparable damage. I found her in the kitchen, sipping coffee and scrolling on her phone, a picture of calm composure that barely concealed her own unease. "Sarah," I said softly, taking a deep breath. She looked up, her eyes momentarily widening in recognition that something was different. I didn't rush. I let the silence stretch, giving weight to the moment, and then continued. "I know about the pregnancy. I know you've been keeping it from everyone." Her face went pale, and she set her cup down with trembling hands. I didn't mean for anyone to find out," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "It wasn't supposed to hurt you. I wasn't ready." The words hung in the air, a mixture of vulnerability and fear. I listened carefully, letting her speak, aware that this was the first time she had voiced anything beyond the surface. Her admission was the first crack in the wall she had built, and I knew that pushing too hard could make her retreat again. "I spent months preparing a celebration for you," I said gently, pouring time, love, and effort into something I believed we would share. And then I discovered that the reality was different, that you had been hiding this from everyone. It wasn't just the shower, it was the secrecy, the betrayal of trust. My voice wavered slightly, betraying the depth of my hurt, but I kept my tone controlled, measured. I wanted her to understand the emotional weight of her actions without feeling attacked. Tears welled in her eyes, and she reached for my hand. "I didn't know how to tell anyone," she admitted. "I was scared. I didn't want people to judge me, to treat me differently. I thought I could handle it on my own, and I thought maybe it would be easier if I waited until I was ready." Her voice cracked, revealing the vulnerability she had hidden behind composure and secrecy. I could see that her fear had been genuine, and though it didn't erase the hurt I felt, it provided context for her choices. We sat together for hours, talking carefully, navigating the tangled emotions of disappointment, fear, and eventual understanding. I asked her questions, not to interrogate, but to understand. Why had she felt she needed to hide the pregnancy? Who did she confide in, if anyone? How did she envision the unfolding of her secret? Her answers were fragmented but sincere, revealing layers of complexity that explained, though did not justify, her decision to withhold the truth. By afternoon, the tension in the house had shifted subtly. Other family members, who had begun to notice inconsistencies and fragments of information, started to approach us quietly, seeking clarification, offering support, and expressing their own confusion and feelings of betrayal. It became evident that the secret had affected multiple people, creating a network of unspoken emotions and unacknowledged expectations. And yet, the openness and honesty of the conversation between my sister and me began to unravel that tension, allowing space for understanding and reconciliation. We decided together that the baby shower would still happen, not as a reflection of perfection or performance, but as a true celebration of family, support, and the life she was bringing into the world. The plans were adjusted, simplified, and made more intimate. Guests were informed gently, and a sense of shared anticipation began to replace the underlying tension. The focus shifted from orchestrated perfection to genuine connection, from emotional labor performed in isolation to a collective, supportive effort that acknowledged the complexity of human emotion and circumstance. That evening, as the sun set and the shadows lengthened across the house, I reflected on the events of the past weeks. Months of preparation, anticipation, and emotional investment had led to unexpected revelations and a confrontation with the fragility of trust. Yet, through patience, careful communication, and willingness to confront difficult truths with empathy, we had reached a point of understanding. The betrayal had been acknowledged, the secrecy revealed, and the path toward reconciliation begun. In the quiet of my room that night, I felt a mixture of relief, sadness, and hope. Relief that the truth was out in the open, sadness for the months of emotional turmoil and the feelings of betrayal that could not be entirely undone, and hope that this experience would strengthen our relationships rather than fracture them. I realized that family bonds are not simply built on shared joy, but on navigating the complexities of human emotion, vulnerability, and forgiveness. The next day, as we prepared for the rescheduled baby shower, the atmosphere was transformed. My sister's smile was genuine, tinged with humility and gratitude. Family and friends were present not just to celebrate, but to witness a story of resilience, understanding, and the power of truth. I watched as she opened her gifts, expressed heartfelt thanks, and shared laughter and conversation with those around her. And in that moment, I understood that the months of preparation, the emotional journey, and the confrontation with betrayal had all led to something far more meaningful than a perfectly orchestrated event, a moment of genuine connection, mutual understanding, and the affirmation of trust rebuilt. By the time the celebration wound down, I sat quietly, reflecting on the journey. The secret that had once threatened to fracture our family had instead catalyzed a process of reflection, communication, and reconciliation. The hurt had been real, but it had been addressed with honesty and empathy. And as I looked at my sister, now radiant with the knowledge that she was surrounded by love and support, I felt a profound sense of closure. The recognition that even in moments of secrecy and betrayal, the capacity for understanding, forgiveness, and familial love can prevail. What do you think about this story? Did you expect this ending? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to like this video if you want to see more.